I'd now like to invite our next keynote speaker, Ms. Gabrielle Mordi, the CEO and Artistic Director of Studio A, Australia. Studio A is one of Australia's leading supported studios for professional artists with intellectual disability and a social enterprise initiative of Studio Artists Northside. Studio A's program works in complement with Studio Artists, which delivers more recreationally focused creative programs for adults with disabilities with a focus on building life skills. Let's warmly welcome Gabrielle Mordi.
Hi everybody, and thank you so much for having me. I feel very honoured to be presenting at this forum. So as I've been introduced, my name is Gabrielle, and I'll just figure out how to start the first slide. Just that. Excellent. And in line with the tradition of the forum, I'll say that I have blonde hair. I think I'm of average height. I have a fringe. I'm wearing a green top, some black pants with flowers on them, and some Swedish clothes. So I am the CEO and founder of Studio A. Studio A is a Sydney-based arts company that provides professional development to artists with intellectual disability, and we started in 2016. So on this first slide is an image of Matthew Calandra. He's a Studio A artist who has Down syndrome, and Matthew is seated on a white cube plinth looking to his left. He's pictured against a white backdrop and he's wearing a yellow and black floral shirt, black pants, sneakers, a watch, and a white bow tie. And I think that in this image, Matthew looks pretty cool. And really, this image is what Studio A is about. This is from a fashion shoot that Matthew was invited to participate in last year. And I think in this image, Matthew looks like quite distinguished. It's an image of respect. And it's really putting Matthew on a platform where he just looks at his best. And that's what Studio A is about. I met Matthew in Studio Arts. So Studio Arts is Studio A's parent organisation, and Studio Arts provides recreational programs for adults with disability. I met Matthew over a decade ago, and it was artists like Matthew who inspired me to start Studio A. So now I'm going to show you an image of Matthew's artwork. This is from Carriageworks, which is a really premier arts institution in Sydney. This is Matthew's work in 2021. It's a large, kind of 2-metre high image on wood, a graphic drawing of a very kind of strong line drawing, which is very typical of Matthew's style. And it was curated by a very prestigious curator into an exhibition of contemporary artwork in Sydney last year. And I think it kind of represents what Studio A is about, which is providing opportunities for artists with intellectual disability and really putting them into the kind of mainstream art world. So when I first met Matthew, around, as I said, around a decade ago, Matthew was working at Studio Arts, and he was working in a recreational program with around kind of 200 other people with disability. And at the time, Matthew had never shown his work in a gallery. I was the graduate of art school. Despite being the founder of Studio A, I actually have no formal training in working with people with disability. All my training is as an artist and an anthropologist. And when I first met Matthew, I had absolutely no experience working with people with disability. I had just offered to volunteer in this recreational art program. And in the program, I stumbled across people like Matthew, people who were making these absolutely incredible bodies of artwork, and who were making it with a focus and a determination that was far greater than half the people I'd attended art school with, many of whom spent half the time outside having a cigarette break. And I thought, my goodness, why do artists like Matthew not have the opportunities that artists I was meeting at art school have? Why don't they have the opportunity to have skill development, to put their work in galleries, to earn an income from their practice? And so that's what Studio A has been about. And now we have Matthew's work in Carriageworks. And last year his work was also collected by the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and that's a pretty major achievement. I think it's one of the first artworks by a person with intellectual disability collected by the Art Gallery of New South Wales. I'll get to show you that work in a moment. There are some other factors that I think are important in the artwork which I'm showing. And another of those is who the artwork is of. It's of another Studio A artist, Sky Saxon. At that exhibition called No Show, Sky was performing as a shaman, and Matthew was inspired to illustrate Sky. And I think it kind of shows the relationships and connections between the Studio A artists and the community that the artists have formed. The wooden panel that Matthew has drawn on was created by another contemporary artist, Simon Wheeldon. And again, it shows the ways that artists are working collaboratively. Simon is an artist without disability. So now I'll move to talking about studio arts. So in this slide, there's an image on the left of a man dancing. There's an image in the center of a woman hugging two men. And on the right side is an image of a man weaving with a woman assisting him. So I'm just going to read out what the slide says about studio arts. So studio arts provides support to adults with disability through programs in creative arts and life skills. A true community within a community. Studio arts is a place where adults with disability can be supported to set goals and reach beyond those targets. A place where our members can learn to read, write and cook, as well as create and develop artistic practices in visual and performing arts. We offer members and families help to navigate a changing context of funding and support, keeping the studio arts values of inclusion, equity and respect ingrained in a culture of acceptance and endless possibilities. So Studio Arts has 3 premises across Sydney, and as I said, it's Studio A's parent company, and it's where Studio A evolved from. Around 300 adults with disability attend studio arts programs weekly, and what I really want to emphasize from the outset is that although I'll be mainly talking about Studio A because that's the program that I work in, there's no hierarchy between Studio A and Studio Arts. Studio A gets a lot of publicity because we have some very high profile outcomes, but the programs very much work in complement, and Studio Arts has incredible well-being outcomes. And without the Studio Arts program, the Studio A program couldn't operate. And here is an image about Studio A. And in the image, we have 2 artists painting on a very ginormous wall. And I'll talk more about that work in a moment. So I'll just describe to you what this slide says. Studio A is Sydney's only supported studio for professional artists with intellectual disability, and we're a social enterprise. Our artists are talented but do not have access to normal education and employment opportunities, and Studio A provides both. Through Studio A, our artists are exhibiting and selling their work, receiving commissions for new work, and licensing their intellectual property to major corporations, universities, arts institutions, and designers. 4 Studio A artists were finalists in Australia's leading portrait prize, known as the Archibald, last year. 7 Studio A artists were commissioned in 2020 to paint a 300 square metre mural on the forecourt wall of the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and that's the image that is pictured. And in 2021, Studio A artists created over 3,000 square metres of public art in high-profile sites across Sydney, seen by over 470,000 people. And now I'm just going to show you a little profile video about Studio A. Hopefully I am. We're just getting the sound to work. Yeah, it's done.
I love the forest. Art is good and fun.
My name's Tom. My name is Tom. I started making my first art when I was a little human child.
When making a human, I draw animals, butterflies, flowers. All my life I've been an artist.
My name is JC Kim. I'm an artist of Studio A. I am a very colorful person who loves the rainbow and love being creative.
I am an artist. I carry out on that. I was a boy, sent to drawing, and I made so much better.
My life feels boring without any art at all. That's me right there on the top left tower, my colorful rainbow flat.
Studio A is first and foremost a visual arts company. We're a support studio and we provide professional development to artists with intellectual disability. My name is Gabrielle and I am the director of Studio A. Studio A provides a powerful sense of pride for our artists. We have really seen their sense of self-esteem, but also their sense of confidence, and also rippling out into their families.
I was a little girl and my mom always told me a amazing child. She's a loving parent. She was there for me.
For many of the families, when their children were young, many of the parents at Studio A told me that they were really quite explicitly told. There's just a technical difficulty. They told me that they were really quite explicitly told. For many of the families, when their children were young, many of the parents at Studio A told me that they were really quite explicitly told. Okay, I can tell you what they were explicitly told. They were told, do not expect much from your child. So, which isn't the part where you're meant to laugh, but that is the point of the next part of that video. So, the video is on our website, so you can go and watch the rest of the 2 minutes left. But the point of what I was saying in that video was that literally so many of the parents at Studio A have told me the stories of when their children were young, and they were told, I guess, comments that really reflect entrenched community stereotypes and stigmas and perceptions about people with intellectual disability. And a key part of what Studio A does is really break through those stigmas. And that's part of why it's important that the artists are having a high profile in the art world. Because by being in the art world, their art reaches a huge audience. And the art that they make is about their personhood and their humanity. And by having their art in the art world, audiences who may otherwise not come into contact with people with intellectual disability get an insight into the life experience of a person with intellectual disability. And they also get insight that a person with intellectual disability can actually express themselves in quite complex ways when given the right support. So basically that was the synopsis of the end of that video. And now I'm going to take you through some of the examples of how Studio A are achieving this. So as I said, Studio A were commissioned in 2020 by the Art Gallery of New South Wales to create a 300 square metre mural in the forecourt of the gallery, in its largest wall. So it's basically the most kind of prestigious entrance court to the gallery, and it's really one of the most prestigious galleries in Australia. On the slide, I've got 3 images of the artists actually working on the mural. There's Megan Pelham on the left, and Matthew Palandra and Megan painting in the centre. So this was a real breakthrough moment. When I first conceived of kind of starting Studio A, there was so little representation by artists with disability in the mainstream art world, and galleries like the Art Gallery of New South Wales just didn't show, represent or collect work from this community of artists. And that's not because the art that these artists make is not good, it's because they didn't have the right support systems in place to support them to achieve these kinds of outcomes. And that's what Studio A has done, put the right support systems in place, the right kind of advocacy, and when you get those things in place, along with several other kind of structural changes, including government policy, then these kinds of outcomes can be realised. So the 7 artists worked to design the mural collaboratively together, and then they literally spent 2 weeks in the gallery painting it on the walls, and the public got to watch them do that. And the artists really flourished in that limelight, and Megan, who's here on the left, we had to keep reminding her to focus on the painting and not simply blow kisses from the scissor lift, which she enjoyed doing. And the artists worked at heights they'd never worked at before, such as high up on the scissor lift. And this is some of the segments of the mural. And I thought what was really beautiful was what the artists chose to represent, and that's the relationships in their life. So it was a chance for the artists to really celebrate and represent who was important in their lives. And on the left is Megan with her mum, Maya. And Maya tells me about when Megan was first born, and in the hospital when they saw that Megan had Down syndrome, the doctor said to her, "What would you like to do with her?" And I think that kind of reflects that kind of entrenched stereotype about the capacity of a person with Down syndrome, and now you see Megan reaching the highest of the kind of cultural heights that she can reach. And I think it's so beautiful that Megan chose to represent her mother. And of course, in the hospital at that time when Megan was born, Megan's parents said, "We want to take her home and love her." And then on the right, we have Matthew Palandra with his French housemate Miriam, and he's decided to represent Miriam holding their pet rooster. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the big stars of Studio A, which is Tom Roberts. So I first met Tom Roberts about a decade ago out of a suburban train station in Sydney, and he was a pretty eccentric character at this train station, and he caught my eye. And so he had a little assemblage of things I couldn't work out, little kind of sculptures on the edge of the train platform, and he'd assembled them, and he was standing back from the platform with these little assemblages, and he was waving at the trains as they went by. Tom has autism, and he has a real love of trains. And he was, as I said, quite a kind of noticeable and eccentric character on the platform. But what I saw Tom doing was actually creating a contemporary art installation. Now, Tom was quickly ushered off by the train guards, and it was seen as a bit of a nuisance on the train platform. Turned out that Tom was actually attending Studio Arts, and I got to know Tom a lot better. Tom, prior to Studio Arts, Tom had got into some different kinds of conventional supported employment, and he'd never flourished there. He'd never flourished there because really at his heart, he's a complete artist. He's a total eccentric. He's one of my favourite people. He has all kinds of eccentricities, such as calling people different names. So if Tom were here, he would tell you that my name is not actually Gabrielle, it's Kylie Panther, and he would tell you that I am a Gold Coast tower and that I'm a Melbourne tram, because he also associates people as being certain building types and train types. He also has a passion for the crowns of people's heads, and he loves to peer into your crown and see creatures in there. And you can see in the top right, Tom is actually doing these unique kinds of crown portraits, and he's peering into the crowns of the couple's head, and he's drawing the creatures that he sees in there. In the bottom corner, you can see Tom on a couch with one of his paintings of Bert from Sesame Street, and it's been transferred into a type of homewares. And then in the big image, you can see a series of big banners of portraits that are painted by Tom. There are 9, I think, in total. And that's actually Tom in 2019 in the National, which is Australia's leading exhibition for contemporary artists. Tom was the first artist with intellectual disability to be curated into this Contemporary Art Festival, and it was a real major moment for Tom, for Studio A, and for really the disability art sector in Australia. So what Tom has painted on this side is a series of portraits of important people in his life. This ranges from family members to contemporary artists, and on the flip side, Tom has painted the trains that he identifies those people as being. So I guess the part of the point of what I'm saying is that Tom went from being someone who couldn't maintain a conventional employment and to someone who was doing eccentric things on a train platform and kind of getting in trouble from the train guards, to someone who with the right support gets recognised as a leading Australian contemporary artist. And here you can see Tom in 2021, I think it is, in the Archibald Prize, Australia's leading portrait prize. He's a finalist. Tom has painted Studio A's chairman, who's a leading eminent arts lawyer in Australia. And you can see Tom's comment here. He says, "Being in the Archibald makes me happy, smiling and proud. I would love to inspire other people to become a famous artist. I would like to be an artist until I'm a very old man." And I think what's really beautiful is that the Art Gallery of New South Wales decided to put Tom's portrait of Shane, who he calls Adam, on the front banner of the gallery, and they also turned it into a postage stamp. As I said, Shane/Adam is a very eminent arts lawyer, and he describes Tom as being one of his best and strangest friends. And I think it's a sign of how art can really cross these kind of social barriers and can bridge gaps where people who may otherwise never come into contact with each other make contact and forge these kinds of remarkable friendships. And I should mention that I last week was in New York with Tom. Tom was presenting at a conference. It's been a multi-year dream of Tom's to go to New York City, and he was able to self-fund his trip to New York through the earnings from his art career. And here are a variety of the artists at the Archibald opening. We have 4 artists who are Archibald finalists, and we have on the right, Victoria and Matthew. Victoria Atkinson was an Archibald finalist and Matthew was a Salman Prize finalist, and behind him is the work that the Art Gallery of New South Wales then went on to collect for their own collection. And there's 4 artists and Tom who are all celebrating their Archibald and Salman success, and Tom is holding up a beer. And when I asked Tom in preparation for this presentation, what's the difference between Studio A and Studio Arts? Tom told me that at Studio A you get more free wine and beer, because that was his genuine reflection on the difference, because he gets to go to more art openings. And I've got a quote here from Emerald Pellet, a journalist at the Associated Press, and she says that Studio A is a Sydney artist collective defying stigmas one piece at a time. And here I've got another image of Catherine McGuinness with her Archibald subject, which is Rosie Deacon, and that's on the left. It's a very bright, colourful painting, and Catherine, who's a very extroverted, extravagant character, is wearing a seagull on her head. And on the right is Megan Pelham with Anna Plunkett, who's actually a major fashion designer in Sydney, and she's wearing some of Megan's designs on the fashion that she's created, and Megan has painted Anna's portrait for the Archibald. And again, these are people who would never have crossed paths. They're in very kind of different social worlds, but through Studio A and through their love of art, they forged these deep friendships. Emily Crockford is again one of our very leading artists. It's a picture of her in front of her work, and she says, "At Studio A, my art has gone good, 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 good. Since coming to Studio A, I feel like a gold star genius. I love meeting new artists through the program. Making art makes me feel like rainbow colours, like I am an adventurer." And a quote from Matthew Westwood, one of the major Australian art critics for The Australian. He says, "Topping it all is the self-worth the artists have by being productive members of society. When they see their work on the walls of the Art Gallery of New South Wales or surrounding a construction site or worn by a fashion model, their pride can hardly be contained." And this is the final artist I'll talk about, and it's Greg Sindel. And here's a quote from Greg's mother. She says, "Studio A is perhaps the only place, apart from family, where Greg is treated as an equal. It gives him the opportunity to meet with like-minded people, other members and staff, and to call himself an artist." Greg is a very, very dedicated graphic novelist and comic artist. When I first met him back at Studio Arts, he used to follow me around the room with his kind of character design, begging me for feedback. And I don't even read comics, so I thought, why on earth are you asking me for feedback? You should be meeting another comic artist like you would do if you'd gone to art school, for instance, and you should be getting kind of mentorship from a professional comic artist. And that's what Greg went on to do. And now he has published, I think it's 8 graphic novels. And when Greg was about 30, he travelled with us to Australia's kind of capital, Canberra, and he presented work at a major music festival for young people. And here he is at the Spilt Milk Festival doing one-on-one portraits for the leading performing artists who performed at the festival. The reason that I included this is because Greg is 30 and he'd never spent a night away from home. Because Greg was motivated by his professional art career, he agreed to leave his parents and go away for a night with Studio A. So through his drive to be an artist, he actually achieved a major life goal, which was to spend the night away from his parents. Throughout the experience, he had a lot of anxiety and he kept saying, Gab, promise me that I'll see my parents again. And I kept assuring him, yes, you will see your parents again. And so I kind of include that to show the layers of outcomes that the artists are achieving through their dedication to the artists and through the opportunities that come to them as professional artists. I am aware of the shortness of time, so I'll try and kind of not talk too long about this, but I wanted to include some examples about how Studio A is artist-led and about how we really try to listen to the artists and prioritise their voice. And this is an example. It's a series of pages that were published in the magazine ArtLink. And what we did was we asked the artists to tell us their goals, which is what we do all the time, but we asked the artists to write it in their words, in their text. And so this, and the staff did it as well. And so it was very much about kind of prioritising the artist's language and voice. And here's one text from Tom Roberts, which is on the left, and it says, I do some photocopies to make a bar chart that I make as a sunrise. I am an artist. I do some painting, find some pictures. My favourite is doing people's portraits. Tom Roberts. And another way that we do this is by inviting Greg, who is the comic artist that I just talked about. We invited Greg to illustrate and animate our National Disability Insurance Scheme policies. So as a National Disability Insurance Scheme service provider, Studio A has to abide by certain standards according to the NDIS scheme. And it's about protecting the rights of our artists. But in doing this, what we realised is that we had these easy-read versions of the policies, but we realised that the artists, no matter how easy read we made them, none of the artists read them, and none of the artists really understood them, and half the staff didn't really engage with them and found them a bit dull as well. So when Greg illustrated them, we then worked with the University of Technology in Sydney, and they turned them into this animated series. And I was aiming to show the complete animation, but I think because of time, I'll just show a minute of it. So, again. Okay, they're going to click for me. Oh, that's the
Right policies illustrated by Greg Stendhal. Meet the characters. Studio A staff. Studio A building. Studio A artists. Studio A supports professional artists to help their creative plans come true. The Studio A board and CEO plan out how the studio should be. The staff follows that plan while they're doing their jobs. Studio A fights for and protects your rights.
Oh, hail the knights!
And Studio A will never restrict your freedoms.
Oh no! Enemy soldiers of the evil wizard had kidnapped this unfortunate little
You can make choices for yourself, what you eat, what you wear, what color paint you use. The Studio A's job to defend your choices. even if that choice involves doing something risky or scary. Studio A will help you understand any dangers or risks you might face.
So again, you can go onto the Studio A website and watch the complete 5-minute animation. And Greg has now gone on to be commissioned by Arts Law, which is the major arts advocacy service across Australia, and he's been commissioned to illustrate and animate a visual version of artists' rights that will make it more accessible to artists with literacy challenges. And he's also just completing the Disability and Inclusion Plan graphic version of, or I should have said, the National Gallery's Disability and Inclusion Plan. So inspired by this work, he's been commissioned, he's earning an income, he's raising a profile, creating the first Disability and Inclusion Plan for the National Gallery. So he's really become an arts leader and advocate through his passion, his graphic novel practice. And to finish, I've got an image of Megan Pelham, Studio A artist, and she's modelling in the Romance Was Born fashion wear, which features Megan's poetry and design. Megan is an inherent romantic, and all her work is about love. And I included this because it's just gorgeous, but also because this is inherently what Studio A and Studio Arts are all about. It's about supporting people to do what they love. And I think when you're doing what you love, that's where well-being comes from, that's where happiness comes from, that's where great artwork comes from. And here is an image of Matthew Calandra, again in his bow tie and floral shirt. He's gazing into the future and looking kind of content and inspired and looking like a man with a vision. And again, to finish, that's what Studio A is about. Respect and respect for people with disability and simply support for them to fulfill their dreams, whatever they may be. Thank you.
Thank you to Gabrielle for that very, wonderful slide presentation throughout the whole time. My heart was thumping so hard because I was like, this is what we are trying to do, and I think that's collectively what all of us in this room are really hoping to do. That it's about the empowerment of each individual and how we see them first from what do they want rather than what do we think they should do. So just to, if I can have the slide back on with the panel title, this panel discussion was really meant to actually open up the conversation on empowerment and arts and disability beyond professional development as just one way of looking at it. I think Tim, earlier this morning in his presentation said not everyone thinks of themselves as 90% of the people he worked with don't think of themselves as an artist. And we do a lot of work in the community, working with many SSAs and many SPED schools, and we know that there's a whole spectrum of interest and engagement and how the arts is in a way facilitated and brought into the community space. So I thought that I wanted to sort of kind of like shift some conversations, really more into community-based services and to just see, what is the role of the arts and sort of empowering individuals. How do we think that, when we think of the idea of meaningfulness, where do the arts come in and how might we reframe the way we think even when we talk about empowered individuals across lower support, higher support needs as well. Yeah, so if I can just invite the panelists, maybe I will just skip Gabrielle, only just because you had your chance to share what you do. And a really wonderful one at that, to invite the other three panelists to introduce yourself, and also to maybe make a comment about what the idea of meaningfulness and empowerment means to your area of work that you do in your organization. Yeah, so maybe Kevin first. You have a slide, right, that you wanted to show now?
Right, yeah. So maybe I'll just describe myself first very quickly, right? So I'm short crop hair. I cropped it yesterday just for this, so that I look a bit brighter, otherwise bushy tail and not so nice. We heard this morning you had the 20s, you had the 30s, you had the 60s, 40s, I'm in the 50s, about to get my CPF, for those who know what CPF is. I'm in blue throughout, and that's Minds Colors. I'm the CEO for Minds. Minds stands for Movement for the Intellectual Disabled. One more descriptor I'll add on. If you can notice, I'm wearing a lapel. On my lapel, there's a colorful hat that says I am Minds. I'm also wearing colorful socks. Because in Minds, we believe, and that slide will capture it, because we believe in adding to the color the life of the clients that we serve. Currently, mine serve in close to about 5,000 persons with intellectual disability. That is only a drop in the ocean. We estimate there's about 100,000 living in our communities. All right, so we're only serving 5,000. I think what was shared in the session this morning as well, Gabriel talked about it, and even Ms. Suzuki talked about it as well. I think that the central belief and central mantra in Minds, where we have a whole range of services that your slide that you see, all the way from 7 to 70 and more. Our oldest client is 87 in an adult disability home, is to believe that each PWID that we serve has the innate ability to be trained, to produce and to be able to be a value contributor to society. That's our central belief. With that, we reframe what we're doing. It's not about just the program or what we are doing. It's about these two constructs in the quality of life that you see on your left-hand side of the house, which is based on the WHO QOL construct of 6 domains and 24 facets. And I think Katie and Tim talked about the cosmology of the different entities coming into play in order to help that happen. And we have that in the 3C circles at the bottom as well. Because in order for a PWID to be a value contributor to society, we have artists, we have, for example, other SSAs that come alongside. But SSAs alone are not enough. Even with our regulatory body where Ron represents SGU coming alongside, it's not enough. You need the community to come in. So we have 3 parts of caregiver, clients, and the community. We did mention the government, the government side house is assumed there already. It has to be there, right, Ron? Yeah, okay. So that's one construct. It's about how do we enhance the quality of life for the PWID. But at the individual level, there are 3 E's that kind of anchors us in what we are doing, and it's on your right-hand side, right? And after hearing Clara this morning, maybe I should change it. It's not so much of reframing what success looks like, but reframing what excellence for the PWID looks like. Because the definition of excellence is individualized, and it has to be individualized, per se. Because our definition and using our own lens of what excellence means to that particular PWID may not mean anything. And we may be setting the person up for failure rather than for excellence in that sense. In that regards, there are 3 E's that we look at. One is looking at how the PWID can, in their own ways, and in this particular picture here, through art, empower others, inspire others to want to come forward to do that as well. And there's no particular referencing of which art form here points to which particular E in a sense, all does. And the one picture I just want to highlight specifically is the drummers. For those who have seen our taiko drummers at work, they have been around since we started our Minds Perform since 2012. They have been represented at National Day. And the idea, and we are very glad for the National Day committee to consider having persons with disability participating in National Day as well, because this is what the nation is all about. Social cohesion, including the persons with disability, in this case, individual disability coming along. Hence, inspiring others to want to make a difference for the country as well. The second E is about expression of aspiration. They do have, and Dr. Dalville shared this morning about Dr. Jasprit, aspirations of her being a dancer, per se, is the same. All PWIDs, if we do bother to listen and give them a ear, they do have aspirations. The question is, do we pause in our busy life to listen to them, per se? And I just want to share 2 pictures on the right of these 2 artists that we have in Minds Arts. What they're carrying out is a miniature picture of their art form, but the larger version is on display at Dell's Enterprise Business Solution Center, where they welcome international partners into their Dell Solution spaces. And they are proud, and they have been our dedicated supporter for the last 10 years. This is our 10th anniversary. And what they do is that they commission pictures whenever they have pink artworks, when they have new buildings coming up, and they put it up there, put the artist's name, and they put a price tag. And when someone buys it, the money goes back to the artist and a certain portion goes back to the center as well. And then they start all over again. If it doesn't get sold, it get auctioned at Dell's year-end celebration. So I think that's excellent in terms of having the ability and platform. Gabrielle talked about, we haven't got that yet, in a sense, our artists painting at our galleries, but we have been painting. For those who, anybody lives in Woodlands? Yeah? Go to the Woodlands MRT station, there's an artwork that's done by our artists, if you didn't realize. And we are working with SMRT to do more of that. Why is that important? It goes back to the community. If the artist feels that, and we give them the space to be connected to the community, the possibility of them being able to live in the community and hence enhance their quality of life goes up exponentially. And the last one I'd say is about enablers. While we talked about we enabling them to learn, actually they enable each other to learn as well. All right. We have a program called Olaf, which is our Life, Our Voices, where we train and develop PWIDs to become advocates for the PWID space. And with that, we have grown about 200 PWIDs, 40 which are very active. And from this, we are developing what we call special interest groups, who are the areas where the PWIDs want to explore, including art, to say. And this is where they discuss and decide. It's like what Gabriel said, they have a choice. They make that choice. We support and we find ways, and I'm very glad, again, privileged for Angela to allowing us the space of collaboration. We are quite clear in minds, we cannot do this alone. We look at the broad base, but when it comes to special skill sets, for example, art, all right, the ability for SSAs to come together, like minds and artists to come together, it is important. Then we can actually provide a scaffolding that they can continue to hone and grow their skills as they move into the adult space, beyond the post-18 education. So with that, I thought I'd give you a picture in terms of what Minds does and how we are putting the client in the center of it all with the fundamental belief that each PWID client that we serve has the innate ability. The challenge for us is to find out what their interest is, grow them early, partner with like-minded SSA to set them up for success, or in Clara's words, excellence in their lifespan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very succinct description, and the different aspects of the work that Minds does, how that comes through. Maybe I invite Evelyn. Evelyn is, she's the head of the art department, right, at AWA School. And when we first invited Evelyn was like, although, but I'm next to the CEs and the DCs, but I want to say that we wanted to bring Evelyn in because she's one of the many silent warriors on the ground, really every day fighting a battle because there are just so many needs on the ground, and then there are many challenges that they are the frontliners who have to find ways to reimagine the space that they work with. So maybe Evelyn, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'm Evelyn. So this is my sign name, E, and put in front of my face and draw a smiley face. Okay, so so since young I've been praised to be a 开心果. Okay, so literally translate as happy fruit. Okay, so that's why this, or you can say it's pistachio. Okay, so so I have many people telling me that I also send off colorful and positive energy. Okay, so next I'm going to describe myself. So I'm as young as you think I am. Okay, then if I have to associate myself to a shape, maybe imagine pistachio. Alright, then currently I have purplish hair, and the color depends on wash to wash. Okay, it changes. Yeah, and I'm wearing a multicolored printed maxi dress with orange wedges, heels, and I'm heavily accessorized with dangling earrings. Oops, I think it's gone. Oh, gone. Yeah, okay, never mind. And chunky rings and bracelets. So, yeah, that's me. So, well, as what I do, like the other day I was sharing that I'm a player. I mean, I play, I love to play, and although there are many ways to define play, it's always associated with joy, cheerfulness, happiness, and a sense of motivation, right, and spontaneous. And it's also, everyone choose to play, yeah, if you can. So it's always directed, it's also a directed process through trial and error, so which I think is very valuable for learning, which we learn through trial and error, and we don't get it at the first time, you know, it's okay. Yeah, so the school I work with, the special school I work with, serve students with moderate to severe disability. So, such as autism, intellectual disabilities, what else? Down syndrome, and some very uncommon ones like Williams syndrome that sometimes we're like, something that we have to navigate around to find out more, and usually they coexist together, like they could have ID and as well as autism. So, yeah. And then our vision is to empower our students to thrive in the community. And what do community means to our families? It really depends. It means different things to each family and each of the students that we work with. It could be like friendship, collaborate friendship, like or it could be participate in family activity, to eat out together, or it could be just making an independent choice of what I want to wear, what I want to eat. I think Gabriel was sharing also. So, or for some it could be taking a bus independently to work. Yeah, so as you can see the spectrum, or you could say that the needs for each family is different, and this is where we have been talking about since morning. Like we have to look into the strength and interest of each family. Yeah. So so in response to what I think about meaningfulness and empowerment, I think it really first begins by exploration of the strength and interest of each individual. Yeah, and art is just another way of knowing the world. It's just as important as other disciplines in our life. We study math, English, science, and history, right? So it's just something that we learn about the world, how to use math, English, right? But art is just another way of looking at the world through colors, through balance of space and things like that. Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think really arts should be valued as it is, rather than the process. Rather the product itself. So the process is more important. Yeah. Thank you.
Over to Ron.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ron from SG Enable. I'm a Chinese male, typical Chinese male, Singaporean male with short hair, wearing glasses. So today I'm wearing white shirt, khaki pants, and maybe blue jacket. So I'm from SG Enable. I think Kelvin so elaborated. We are a bit close to government, but not really government. So we see ourselves as positioned as the focal agency for disability in Singapore. So what we try to do is really work with partners to create equitable opportunities for persons with disability to really aspire and fulfill their potential through partnership and also social innovation. Yeah. So I think Evelyn and Kelvin has captured most of the things, but I would like to share more personally what I actually, when I work day to day, what goes through my mind, right? So when we look at it holistically, when we talk about disability, it's really a spectrum of abilities, needs, right? And I believe that the needs, the abilities of each individual changes through the phases of life. So it's not just about every individual, but when an individual goes through their lives, right, they have different needs, different abilities, different interests. So what is always going through our mind, right, is together as a sector, disability sector, can we actually design programs coherently, right, that we actually add to each other, right, to support the individual, right? Because I think as in any social service programs, there's a lot of overlaps, right? A lot of similar ideas. How can we actually come together to really synergize efforts and actually be very person-centric, right? So what I do is really I try to inculcate this into all the work that I do. So one of the work initiatives that I want to share from SG Enable is really the Enabling Lives Initiative grant that is funded by Tote Board and administered by SG Enable. So what we try to do there, right, is I think for the past 2 years we've been very deliberate. If you look through all the problem statements that we curate for the past 2 years throughout our grant calls, it's really being focused on the different phases of life of the persons with disabilities. How can different programs or services come in to support the different phases of life, right? So again, my philosophy is really that we need to come together to ideate. So what we do in SG Enable is really we want to go out there, reach out to like-minded stakeholders, social innovators, right, out there to provide really different perspectives. It's like what Gabrielle shared. Previously, before studio A, right, she didn't really work with persons with disabilities, but she brought me a new perspective into what art can be, how art can be professionalized in Australia. So this is what we try to do in the ELI grant, to reach out to the community out there, to the rest of Singapore, to really see how we can come together to innovate and think of new ideas together. So what we want to do is really to catalyze these ideas and convert them into sustainable innovations, right? Sustainable solutions that can be carried out for a sustainable period rather than one-off pilot. So I think a very good example that the ELI team has worked with is Maya Dance Theatre. I think they have a very good Elevate program, right, which is a dancing training program that equips persons with disabilities in communication, creative, as well as job-related skills. So what I found very interesting in the Elevate program is that they are very deliberate in engaging students who are graduating from the school, right, from the special education school, to really engage them. And I think through their program, they really help them to transit into the community. So it's not just about after you graduate school, then find what you want to do. But the Elevate program actually guides them to really find their interest, and it's not just about performance arts, right? Is there other avenues, like maybe even the production crew is interest in working production crew. So I think in Maya Dance Elevate program, they really provide that good transition period for students to find their interest, to understand what they want to do, and then from there, Maya Dance equip them with the skills and the support needed. So I think in short, it's really, I think in SG Enable, we really feel that it's not doing it alone, but working with the rest of partners in the sector and the wider community to develop solutions for this disability community.
Thank you, Ron, as well. I'd just like to maybe pose a question to the panelists, and maybe starting with Gabrielle as well. Actually, in some of our pre-discussions, we talked a lot about society's definition of an empowered individual. We kind of tend to think of them as someone that can self-advocate, that is able to articulate, what my desires are, etc., etc. But I think across the board, it seems that quite a number of the organizations represented here work with people who may not be verbal and who may not often be seen in that same space as someone who, is very articulate, and had conversations around reframing success, and reframing the idea of empowerment. And if I could just invite the panelists to just respond to what is, your idea of empowerment, and how might we reframe success so that it is inclusive. This idea of empowerment could be inclusive towards all, across the spectrum, across support levels.
I like the definition of well-being that was used, and I think that, for me at least, a definition of success is framed around well-being. But well-being can mean a different thing for everyone. So I think the definition of success needs to start from the individual that you're talking about. So at Studio A, we set goals with all of our artists, and our outcomes are led by the goals of our artists. But something that I kind of just want to start out by saying is that when I first started Studio A, I thought, oh yeah, of course, like anyone with disability that is really good at making art would want to be in Studio A and would want to be a professional artist. I had that assumption. And there were people in studio arts who were making amazing bodies of artwork with this great focus. But when I started some of the Studio A projects, I actually discovered that some of the people that I thought would really want to be artists extending themselves and going out and doing residencies, when we took particular people from studio arts out to do an artist residency, some of them said, actually I don't want to do this, I want to go back to studio arts. And hence, the definition of success for those people was actually just doing what they were doing in studio arts. And hence, that's a definition of success for them. And another kind of surprising, not surprising, but just an example I want to share is that the artist I spoke about, Matthew Calandra, who is reaching the kind of pinnacles of success that many contemporary artists would dream of, being collected by the Art Gallery of New South Wales, finalist in big art prizes, etc., etc. For Matthew, when you actually ask him what his goals are, one of his goals is to maintain working at McDonald's 2 days a week. And he actually wants to come to Studio A 2 days a week, and he wants to maintain his position as what he calls the dining room king at McDonald's. And he actually didn't want to come to the opening of the Sulman Prize because he had his shift at McDonald's. Even when McDonald's actually cancelled his shift that day, he kept saying, nope, I'm still going to work. And I think another important aspect of setting goals is also talking with the broader support network that the individual is involved with. So, for instance, our artist Tom Roberts going to New York recently, in order for him to get to New York, he has a phobia of, he has claustrophobia, and he had a phobia of bathrooms on the aeroplane. And so we worked with his behaviour therapist and different supports in order to put in a strategy to support him to be able to catch the plane to New York and overcome his phobia. And that was really important. That's just one example of how we work with the broader supports in the person's life. Tom successfully used the bathroom on the plane and overcame his phobia, and I actually think he may have developed a new problem, which was using the bathroom too much, and that might be the next challenge we'll be working with his support people on, how to get Tom out of the bathroom on the plane.
Thank you, Gabriel. Any one of the panelists would like to add on or respond to what Gabriel has shared?
Maybe I could add on. I think when we talk about the measure of success, I think what I agree totally with Gabriel. It's really about that individual choice, right? Are they empowered with an option? So I think the definition of success is there's always a choice, there's always an option, always a pathway for the person with disabilities to choose. I think the real failure is when they feel that there's no choice at all. They are just being directed to a certain programs or service. So I think the individualized outcome is really there's always an option for persons with disabilities that they feel that they have a choice in the decision and be a part of the decision making.
Yeah, I thought I'd just add the story that I had, and I'll keep this very short, right? So last year, Mine celebrated our 60th anniversary. So we came up with a harebrained idea of doing 60 kilometers in one shot, right? From our most western center ending up to the north. So we had people joining in at 12 midnight on the 2nd of April. We finished off on 2nd of April at 10 a.m. the next day. Along the way, there was a PWID that joined us in the last 15 kilometers. PWID, mind you, 15 kilometers. Yes, he's an athlete, he's a swimmer, etc., etc. But halfway through, not even halfway through, 2 kilometers into the last 15 kilometers, he said, I don't want to run. I don't want to run. No, I don't want to run. You know. So there were 2 of us. By then we were almost, because we already covered 3/4 of 60. Then how? So I remember talking to the mother, it's about motivation, right? And finding out what motivates him. He's a swimmer. So this was 2 weeks before that run, and I was talking to the mother. I said, does your child understand this concept of personal best? Because if you're an athlete, you go for personal best, right? He doesn't. So then I asked, how do you get him to perform at peak performance as a Special Olympian? Week in, week out, month in, month out. His motivation is travel. His concept is travel. If I'm able to swim well and get selected into the national team, I get to travel. So now I bring forward to the 15 kilometers run, right? At the start of that 15 kilometers, the remaining 15 kilometers, I remember the mother telling him, at the end, I'll bring you to McDonald's to eat McWings. So throughout the last 15 minutes, I was telling him, no, let's try, just finish it. At the end, there's McWings. Up to the 12 kilometers, the wings wasn't working, so I threw in McNuggets and Coke at the same time. Alright. But I think the point is, it's not about what program. We always have this notion, and I'm guilty of that as well. I have 2 kids, right? We think that, hey, this is the best way. Supply drives demand. But we think we come up with a supply because we have the demand, but we don't really know what's the demand until we listen to what the demand is. Right? So the question is, sometimes we are guilty of that. We think they want, so we do more. But actually, it doesn't take. Bottom line is, do we know what's their motivation?
Evelyn, anything from you?
To me, it's really like, what is the interest we're talking about, really what they want to do. If maybe I give another scenario, like if in class during an art lesson, so the objective is to play with colors. Okay, so instead of using brush, could we, if the student choose to play with fingers, I mean use finger to play with a paint, is that okay? Yeah, because I feel like sometimes as teacher we have to meet the lesson goal, like of doing something that to follow. So yeah, so what is meaningful to them? Is it that I must use a paintbrush to color, to mix the color, or I can use my hand? Or rather actually, is it the whole lesson is exploration of the colors? What if I just want to use, just pour the paint into, into cups and see the change? Yeah, so I think we need to really observe the students and see what works better for them, and allow them to make the choice, even if it's no, I don't want. It takes time. So in my experience, like the students don't even want to touch the paint, so we'll just leave it and allow him to observe the rest. Yeah, and then at the 3rd lesson, he finally touched the paint. Yeah, so to me that is more meaningful rather than we come, touch, or mix this. Yeah, but because if you do that, what we're trying to do is follow instructions, or is it the students' interest to touch, to really get in, excited or interested in the things in their environment? Yeah. So, thank you.
I actually want to, throw a last question to the panelists, and it's because we are the last panel, right? I want to throw a question of, if there was just one wish, that you have to sort of, what is an area of change or intervention that you want to make in the area of what you do to sort of really empower the people that work with? What might that be? One wish from Chai Hong. That time she wanted to ask this question, but we didn't get to ask.
Maybe I'll take a stab at it, so that actually I have the 4 minutes to answer. Anyway, I think I go back to that 3 circle that I had, that circle of client, caregiver, and community, right? So if there's one area, and if I had $1 to make a difference somewhere, I would place that dollar on the community space. Not because the caregivers and the clients are not important, they are important. But I think over the years, whether it's at Minds, Artists, 30 years and counting, many other SSAs to be around, I think that awareness among caregivers and among clients have grown. But what I think is still a missing piece is the community side of the house. PWID, some of you may see them or may not see them, because if they are high functioning, we call them invisible disability, but they do need help. The question is that, are we sensitive to what's happening? When a PWID has a behavior of concern acting up in the public space, what do we do? Do we give that cynical look and just walk away and whatever? It happens. It still happens today in modern Singapore. The question is why? Someone talked about inclusive study, which is I think SPS Eric talked about, right? 7 out of 10. We did the same inclusion study. 75% of Singaporeans say I want to help. But that 75% in there, another 75% of that says that it all depends whether I have a good live first experience. Which means to say, If their first lived experience is negative, the chances of them interacting and continue to want to work with that particular disability group is almost next to 0%. So the question is that how do we set the community up for success and be ready to accept the different disability groups that we interact with, per se. I think that's where the straw that will break the camel's back, the proverbial camel's back, right? And I in my mind, I thought there are 3 things that I hope communities can do. And it's about 3 don'ts, right? Don't tolerate, but accept. I think it's not good just to tolerate, but it's really accepting that's important. Understanding and accepting. Don't judge, but listen and learn. I've been in this space only for 4 years, but I'm learning a lot from the clients and still learning. Communities can learn also, as we have shown earlier in terms of how they also encourage community. Then the last one I'll say, and this is a work in progress for myself, right? Don't be a stranger when you have PWID or person with disability in your midst, right? But be prepared to step up. Be prepared to step up when the PWD or PWID is in distress. Don't walk away. Right? There's a lot to learn. I think that's where I hope that we can work together, community and community learns as well.
Thank you. A lot in 3s, huh? Okay. Evelyn?
Can I be greedy and say 2?
Sure.
Okay, so I think if I could have like, the wish list, something would change. I think there are 2 things. One is community, like what Kevin said, and then the next one is outcome. Okay, so when I say community is, can we reframe or reimagine how a community would look like? Because every student we work with or every client would belongs to a family or belongs to somebody there too. So what do they do in their daily life? Is it like maybe, imagine like we go to a hawker center to eat, we go maybe swimming pool, having class, my siblings, like my mom said. But why can it be like something that we go together, like while my sister has tuition, while I have maybe another community event in the community. Yeah. So rather than coming up with isolated activity for them, could we all include together as one community? And second is about outcome. I was thinking like we are all drive about KPIs, right? You always have meet this, meet that. Could we focus on more about the process? Yeah. So during the last 2 days in our workshop, we project artworks. So really, I'm borrowing this word from one of the participants. Okay, the outcome is the process itself. So whatever product it is the byproduct of the process. Yeah, so that's what I did.
I'm an engineer by training, so I'm coming in from a very different perspective, let's say. I think it's something that Kelvin alluded to in terms of understanding the demand. Admittedly, I think in Singapore there's a lack of understanding what is really out there, because I think we agree there's a spectrum of abilities, right? Like Kelvin said that he expects the number to be so much higher for persons with intellectual disability. So if I can really put one thing, my resources is really to go out there, understand the demand, collect the data, right? So that we can always design programs for persons with disabilities to be very targeted to meet their needs, right? Rather than imagining what I think should be done, then I just go there and do it. Then a lot of different disparate programs again. So I reiterate is that I think there needs to be more coherency in the disability sector to work together. And I think what will bring us together is really understanding of the demand, the data of the disability community in Singapore.
The last one, Gabriel.
I guess my wish is just for the voice of neurodivergent people to be heard more in daily life, because I think it makes all sorts of information and experiences way more interesting, and so that's my basic wish, just even beyond the art world, for different kinds of stories and information to be shared more broadly and to enrich the world more broadly. And just a final thought is, I guess did you say you're an engineer in your background? background. Yeah, I'm an anthropologist in my background, and I find it really exciting the connections that art can create between actual people. So the artwork might be the kind of trigger, but I find it really exciting when people from different backgrounds through art are inspired to meet. And just a final vision that I'd love to see more of is I mentioned that Matthew Philander, our artist, would rather go and work at McDonald's than come to an opening. But last year he had a unique vision to dress as a duck. So we listened to him, we respected what he wanted, and he made a duck costume. And when his work was exhibited at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, he said he would come if he could dress as a duck. So Matthew came as a duck to the opening of one of these very prestigious galleries, and he quacked through the gallery. I've never seen him look as excited, and he went up and tapped people on the shoulder, strangers, and said, "I am a duck." And I'd just like to see more moments like that because it was just great.
Thank you to all our panelists. Please give them a round of applause.